The ban on Australians returning to their own country from India will end on May the 15th. Now, the government had announced that date as the first time it would be reviewed. And now the Prime Minister is saying that the ban, he calls it a pause, the ban will end on May the 15th as planned. Well, that's good, of course. But the point is that it never should have been put in place in the first place. And we need to make sure such a ban never happens again except in the most extraordinary of circumstances. I'll explain why in more detail in just a moment. But firstly, more of the good news. As soon as the ban ends, the government is going to get cracking with charter flights bringing Aussies home.
What we will be doing is receiving our first repatriation flight into the Northern Territory as part of the charter arrangements that we have with our airlines to bring back those first people from India at that time.
And in case you think this is just all about millionaire cricketers and indulgent travellers, think about a family separated from their 4-year-old little girl who's been with her grandparents in India, unable to get home for 18 months.
Then it's been almost 1.5 years that we have not seen her grow. What we have seen her is, I literally get emotional when I say that.
Yeah.
Because when her grandmother says that she has grown taller, I literally feel sad.
Yep, Mum and Dad are happy to go and stay with their child in quarantine for a fortnight if they can just get that child flown back to Australia. Now, the risk from these Australian citizens returning from India has been grossly overstated. Firstly, put the poverty, the public cremations and all the other differences aside and look at the raw numbers. They show that daily infection rates in India are still below what they were in the US, UK, Brazil and a host of European nations last year. Yet those countries, Australians in those countries, were never blocked from entry into this country. Remember, just 1% of the more than 200,000 Australians who have come home through hotel quarantine have tested positive. Just 1%, actually less than 1%. And fewer than 1% of those cases have actually passed infection on to anyone through hotel quarantine. So the quarantine process, our much vaunted hotel quarantine scheme, even with the breaches we've seen, has been more than 99% effective. Hotel quarantine is not the problem in this country. Hotel quarantine has kept this nation virtually COVID-free for over 15 months now. Now, if you want to go back just a few months, we can see that most of the infections in hotel quarantine back then came from the US and the UK. The official New South Wales health figures show that in the 4 weeks to Christmas, there were 64 cases from the US and 17 from the UK, accounting for 52% of hotel quarantine infections in New South Wales, which, as you know, was taking the vast majority of people coming home. Fast forward, and over the 4 weeks to May, the latest figures, this had changed to 89 positive cases coming from India, or 50% of all quarantine infections, and just 15 cases, or 8%, from the US. So it's just flipped around, and most of the cases now come from India. So the question is, why did we not stop people coming home from the US and UK when their numbers were high, but we did slap a ban on people travelling from India? Now, what are our rights as citizens? Well, according to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to which Australia, of course, is a signatory, everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country. Sexist language there for the United Nations, isn't it? But it's quite historic. But this is further explained, this proposition, this fundamental right, on the website of our own Attorney General's Department, which says the UN Human Rights Committee has stated that in no case may a person be arbitrarily deprived of the right to enter his or her own country, and that there are few, if any, circumstances in which deprivation of the right to enter a person's own country could be considered reasonable. Now, yes, there are circumstances in which you can do that to your own citizens under international law. But when you force people into quarantine for 2 weeks at their own expense for a disease that is worrying and dangerous, sure, but mild for most people, how do you justify the ban, the blocks to the fundamental rights of our returning citizens, especially when it applies to just one country, people coming from one country suffering a similar fate to many other countries where citizens were spared any such ban? Look, the federal government's responsibility is very clear here, and it appears they've woken up to that. But we need to talk about this, point out these issues, because we shouldn't see the rights of our citizens to return to their own country trampled on in this way ever again.